Alors, bonjour à tous.
Hello, everyone. Attends que je parle. Bonjour. My name is Jean-Pierre Elong Mbassi. I'm the General Secretary for the CGLU Africa, the representative for the African continent. Also, this is a representative for the World CGLU, the World Organization. I was asked to present this day. The topic for today is towards sustainability in African cities. This day, with COM SSA, the Covenant of Mayors of Sub-Saharan Africa, is taking place as part of the Climate Change Summit for Africa, today, September 15th, 2021, from 9 to 3 p.m. Dakar time, Universal Time. We will have 3 sessions today. The opening sessions from 9 till 10:30. We'll be talking about financing climate and climate action and multi-level governance. And I will be the moderator for this session. Second session from 11 to 12:30. And we will be talking about demystifying the SECAP, Sustainable Energy and Climate Action Plan for Climate and Access. Madame Mrs. Marianne Serre from Expertise France will be moderating. The next session will be from 2 to 3:30, adaptation through nature-based solutions. Mrs. Tara Kaite from ICLEI Africa will be the moderator. Before entering into our topic today, I would like to first of all thank the organizers of this day, Made Climate Change, the Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy, the Council of Municipalities and Council of Europe, CEMR, CAA Africa, and those who are also supporting the COM SSA financially and technically, the French Agency for Development, the EU, the German cooperation, the Spanish cooperation. We want to thank all of them and express our deepest gratefulness for their support. Without further ado, I would like to introduce our opening session, COM SSA Day for Challenges to Financing Climate for Local Action. This is a recurring problem which mayors and leaders of municipalities have been stating. This is the issue of financing action, local action, and for climate. Without financing and funding, we cannot implement actions. Over 300 cities have agreed for this, have agreed with the COM SSA in order to obtain funding for the implementation of local actions. Yet, because of the pandemic and the vulnerabilities due to climate change, we have found some uncertainty in the budget for most of the municipalities in Africa. How to tackle the issue of financing climate for local action in this current context of a lack of finances due to the COVID crisis, due to the impact of the climate change on economic activities. Many of the subscribers of the COM SSA would like to know how to go about this regarding this expectation for fundings. Many are also wanting to know how to go about articulating these plans with the climate action of the governments as part of the NDCs. What kind of multi-level dialogue do we have, according to which mechanisms and to whose initiative? In order to tackle this issue, we do have a panel of 8 very competent people with us today who will help us to understand and clarify some issues regarding the way we must tackle this problem. Therefore, we will be listening first for the next hour, rather, we'll be listening to these people. Then there will be a time for discussion for about 20 minutes. During that time, I would encourage you to post all your questions and comments in the chat box, and I will give you the floor possibly if you want to speak directly to our panelists. Following this time of discussion, I will dare to try to sum up in 5 minutes the main points following our discussion and following the presentations. Because of the number of speakers today, I would ask each one of them to limit their presentation to 7 minutes. After 7 minutes, I would have to stop them and ask for the next speaker. I'm sorry about this, but this is what I will have to do, unfortunately. If you wouldn't mind, now I will give the floor to Mrs. Mayor of Dakar, Mrs. Soham El Wadini, to tell us in 7 minutes what has been your experience to implement the energy and climate plan. What strategies did you have for the fundings, to get the fundings for implementing this plan? And I have another question for you. Does the city of Dakar have any special expectations regarding the COP26 that will take place in Glasgow next November? Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Mbassi. First of all, I want to greet all our panelists and all the participants. And I want to say that Dakar was to have this summit, in-person summit, physical summit, but unfortunately, due to the health crisis, we were not able to host the summit. Dakar was to host this summit from September 15 to 17th. Yet we were all ready to welcome you while respecting all the health measures and restrictions. Unfortunately, the COVID-19 has forced us to postpone this event. I take this opportunity to think about all our beloved ones that have been taken away by this disease. We were not able to meet physically, but we have now a virtual meeting that is enabling us through the various panelists to exchange on this issue and to raise some questions regarding the various paradigms, and also to consider our parameters. Our emergency is to try to face future shocks regarding the climate changes and climate hazards. COVID-19 is a sad illustration of the shocks that we are going to face in the future. This pandemic has highlighted the necessity to refocus on local governments in the decision-making process. Local communities, local collectivities, and governments, because of their proximity to the populations, are called to play a key role in that perspective. All the efforts as part of the Covenant of Mayors for Sub-Saharan Africa and the initiatives of the EU in 2015 to support all the efforts deployed by local authorities to implement sustainable energy and climate action, and to support the cities which have signed the convention, and to identify number of projects for their implementation. Today, these are the challenges, the climate fundings that we are raising. This is what we're going to be discussing as part of this opening session today. We're going to be talking about the perspectives for signatory cities in terms of climate funding for local action. The world is facing great hope despite the pandemic. We hope to have a green recovery, not leaving anyone aside, the hope of a world without gas emission. The year 2020 showed a willingness to reach carbon neutrality. 2021 should be a decisive year in that respect. The return of the US in the Paris Dialogue and Paris Agreement, without forgetting the COP26, the expected COP26, this situation is also leading to some high expectations. From the first time the human development has failed, we have not been on the right track to reach our goals in terms of climate. We have less than 10 years before the planet and ourselves would be undergoing some damage, permanent damage. We therefore have an emergency to speed up the process, the funding process. Moreover, we have failed to come up with quality propositions. Therefore, for both donors and investors, we have had an inefficient system missing the target in view of all these damage due to climate change. And the local governments are paying a high tribute for this. We need to improve the mechanism for access to climate funding, to have more appropriate systems. Without that, local governments will not be able to develop large-scale programs and to contribute to the NDCs. To make this more efficient, we need to raise or to face the challenges and meet the challenges for climate change. We need to implement the solutions for supporting all these measures. All these fundings and all the demands make them difficult to access. The emergency is therefore to simplify the access measures at all levels of governance to enable stakeholders to face these challenges. Our problem, therefore, is that we are not in a position to access these fundings. Often we have to go through the state and it makes things more difficult for us. Fundings are here, they exist, we talk about it, but access to these funds is often very difficult for us, local and territorial governments, authorities. What should we do, therefore, to access these fundings? Maybe we should enable cities like Dakar to speed up the implementation of these measures. This is our third phase here in Dakar. This has been funded by the Spanish Corporation, and as cities, we need to go towards the sources of funding to reach modalities for access, criteria for access, to also have support of state for reaching some fundings. To understand also the processes, the procedures, the kind of project that can be eligible and the best way to meet the various forms. These are all necessary steps. That's why we need to reinforce the capacities of the stakeholders to reach the offered opportunities in order to support this process of those measures against climate change. As part of the COM SSA, Dakar has elaborated its own plan thanks to funding from the EU. I want to thank the ambassador, and I take this opportunity. The ambassador from the EU has supported us greatly in this. We've had many meetings with our 19 municipalities. We have invited children from schools to some contests to really raise awareness about climate issues. Therefore, Dakar was able to open up to some various possibilities for funding, reducing gas emissions, and to face issues regarding vulnerability. By 2050, we want to implement these measures. So this is what I wanted to say regarding what we have done for Dakar. And we count on the experience of others, the feedback of others to help us find fundings and execute our plans. Therefore, Dakar City needs the support of key players from the EU and the Green Fund and the ongoing support of others, access to climate funds and fundings, and the multi-level governance for the climate agenda. The climate fund should be able to bring a substantial part to our efforts. This is what I wanted to say to the General Secretary, and I'm open for any other questions. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mrs. President, Mrs. Mayor. You are my president. I call you my president as a vice president of the CGLU Africa. Thank you very much for this presentation. Very brief, but very specific. Really, this is a call to make things simpler, to make access simpler for accessing fundings. Mrs. the Ambassador, the EU has been supporting local climate action through the funding of the COM SSA in Africa. Following the preparation here with the SECA, this is now the time for their implementation. Is the EU ready to amplify and multiply its support in order to face this new demand, following the needs to have concrete actions to implement these actions, following the desire of all the various collectivities? And you have heard the Mayor of Dakar on this, in this aspect.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Secretary General of the UCLG Africa, first of all, I'd like to say hello to all the participants around this round table. Mrs. Mayor of Dakar, we are used to meeting face in face and on the field, so it's really unusual to meet in this way through our screens, but it is an honor and a pleasure to be with you today. Mr. Secretary General of the UCLG, Mr. Secretary of the Council of Communes and Regions in Europe, Mr. Director of the International Council for Initiatives and Local Ecology, ladies and gentlemen, representatives of the Mayors Convention in Sub-Saharan Africa, dear guests, I'm delighted to be with you this morning to participate to this important meeting of the Convention of Mayors for Sub-Saharan Africa, and to listen as to the proposals and suggestion of the European Union towards local actors. So for the COP26, this conference today couldn't be any better and come at a better time. So I'd like to underline the importance of the actions on every day around the world. The stakes are important everywhere. So we have put the climate change challenges at the heart of our purposes. And we want to fight for biodiversity. We have noticed every day that it is on the local level with the local authorities and local actors that are achieved, the involvement and commitment of people. I can see it with myself, with Mrs. Mayor in Dakar, others as well. There are champions who are making a difference. And this is why European Union has been supporting for 5 years the Mayors Convention for Sub-Saharan Africa to encourage cities that are engaged to reduce their green gas emissions and energy consumption, thanks to the implementation and help throughout action plans for sustainability. These are actions that we want to greet, and they have been adopted with the different populations in order for these actions to be concrete and created to be long-lasting. And this is why we put them in place. These action plans, I would also like to highlight that they integrate perfectly to the NDCs, which represent the political commitment of all the signatory countries of the Paris Agreement for the climate. It is this approach that makes us move ahead and forward. And in the Senegal, my entire team is committed and engaged so that at all levels and all the levers that are available be used. So this is also our objective. The European Union's objective is, I think, very clear. It is to change the European Union in a fair entity with modernity, to be fully efficient in the use of the resources and nevertheless still competitive. We are aiming at something high. We want to really mitigate and stop all these gas emissions and make sure that the economic growth still continues. And by 2027, the European Commission will give 25%, 1/4 of its budget for the fight for climate and action plan. So this also guides our recovery strategy, post-COVID strategy, to be fair, resilient, and sustainable. And we also want to congratulate this approach, people for this approach, and there are favorable causes and fertile soil and with our partnership with Africa. And I would like to testify about these common objectives we have with Senegal. I would also like to add, because with the European Union, we are working in teams, and with the Investment Bank for Climate and the member states who are also committing strongly to reduce the green gas emissions and to protect the lands. It is for the well-being of our planet and the effort of these teams that I'd like to underline. This shows the multiplicity of actions we can have and partnerships as well. France, Portugal, and Spain are partners of the EU in the framework of the Mayors Convention for Sub-Saharan Africa, which gathers 36 countries, 9 of the greatest cities in Africa. And to add on to what the President mentioned, I would like to zoom in, if you might let me, zoom in on the Senegal's example that I know well. Since 2015, the EU has led 2 projects, one in Dakar and one in Pitin, which produced climate plans in terms of and territorial projects. And the main theme is quite obvious. It's having a common action plan and line. Everything goes through raising awareness as soon as possible. In Dakar, more than 50 discussion groups have formed, gathering more than 100 community actors in the different city communities. So it means that a number of them have been aware, and sometimes it's very young people who have engaged and committed thanks to the associations for young volunteers. We can acknowledge the momentum that is there, that exists, and their ability to pass on, convey the importance of their actions and as actors and ambassadors. Pekin is also active. More than 20 local committees were set up, mobilizing more than 1,000 community actors, which then move on to the actual action. We go even one step further. We also prepared future investments, high scale, very convincing projects, one financing by the Spanish cooperation, one by the EU, involving the city of Madrid and Metropolis. They are also working on facilitating the access to clean energy and using and scaling up with the public buildings as well. So with the Convention of Mayors, we are concretely putting the NDCs on the local level and strengthening capacities to plan and raising awareness, adaptation, actions to climate change. I would like to as well, since I have the opportunity here, to warmly thank the cities and the mayors of Dakar, Pekin, of course, but also of Monrovia, Sevio in Togo, Yaoundé, Kampala, Nouakchott, Bondy, Mbassi, Bouaké in Ivory Coast, Zoum in Benin, Bangui, Bissau. All these great African metropolises who took responsibility in terms of action, climate action, but also, and I know that this is how it works on the field, you need to really start working, and it's important for the mobilization on works and projects that will prove resilience for the future. I would like to solemnly, if you accept it, pay homage to their determination and their work. And I'm also very glad, sincerely, to see that the partnership with Europe contributed to this appeal. Of course, the ecosystems and biodiversity and people's life is more and more difficult. They're more vulnerable, faced to climate change, but also due to the socioeconomic situations. Faced to these main challenges, the Mayor Convention represents an important participation, and once again, through mobilization of all the populations around these challenges, we are very happy to pursue our efforts with new projects on the African continent, and once again with the European team to provide constructive answers to the challenges we are faced with and the aspirations of the populations to live well. This is the whole idea of the Green Pact, and we will continue to attract through new partnerships in the future years to see the life in green and never leaving anyone alongside the road. Your microphone, Jean-Pierre, is off. Here we go. So I wanted to thank Mrs. Ambassador to comfort us in the way that saying that the European Union will continue providing its support, and we are very happy of what was already done in the past, and we see that there's a continuation with concrete projects, and I really appreciated your indication that the BEI is the bank climate. We will have to see how the local collectivities can have access to the financing. So we will see this later, of course. But first of all, Frédéric, the Council was at the avant-garde of these actions for climate, namely in working on mobilizing populations. Would it be possible to maintain an attractivity or a taste for this and support the local actions in Africa with this sanitary crisis and the budget recession, drastic recession and restrictions that we have seen for all of these collectivities? How can we pursue and stay engaged, seeing the climate urgency that is ahead of us. How can we do this? So please, Mr. General Secretary Jean-Pierre, please, I would like to say hello, Mrs. Ambassador of the EU in Senegal, and Mrs. Mayor as well. And I really regret because we have been apart for too long, and now we also need to meet in person to create these policies, participate to the debate. And I think it's important to keep this in mind. So I'm really sorry not to be able to be in Dakar with you and take advantage of this beautiful city and also see how this city has changed and is still changing thanks to the investment and the work you are providing on the field. So it is only a question of time, and I hope we will be able to travel soon. So Jean-Pierre, you invited me to say perhaps and explain the evolution that took place in the last years with my friend Renaud Nortet. I'd like to thank Climate Chance to have this day together for climate change. And with Romandotech, we have followed the negotiations on climate, and Jean-Pierre, you were also part of them for almost 20 years now by going to and participating in the different EU meetings. And you remember, Jean-Pierre, that 15 or 20 years ago, we were looked upon as aliens really in these meetings because we didn't have a place there. We won on one aspect because everybody is acknowledging now that the fight against climate change will go through the commitment of regions, territories, countries and cities, but we haven't won yet on many points, and especially on the ability given to the cities. Mrs. Mayor reminded us of it, to invest in climate, having access to climate finance in order to facilitate things and projects and for all communities. So it is true there's a commitment of the EU. We need to acknowledge this, and this has been going on for many years already. There's the Paris Agreement, but now we need to support the Paris Agreement thanks to contributions or our participation, financing, and through a mobilization of all actors. And the Mayors' Convention in Sub-Saharan Africa participates in this mobilization of all of the actors. And the Commission trusted us with to work with African actors, with UCLG Africa and all of these actors to support the Covenant of Mayors. And it was a great satisfaction to see how the number of collectivities who signed and who engaged, and a new, more recent engagement of cooperation agencies to support projects which will be models in Africa for other collectivities. What I think is to think out of the box and be different from the existing pilot projects, to generalize action, because now it is urgent. There's a true emergency when we see the crises that follow one another, whether drought in Africa, it is an important topic. We can also talk about erosion along the coastlines. And this is also a very crucial subject in Africa, but it is also true in Europe. We saw all the floods that took place and destroyed different collectivities in Belgium and Germany, in the Netherlands and other regions as well. There were forest fires as well that are that spread in many countries in the Mediterranean basin, but also in the United States and elsewhere. So there is an emergency. And when we have this factor of emergency, we have to do things. It is possible still with the COVID situation, but we need to continue supporting countries that are faced with this with the COVID health situation. But we need sometimes to rethink about traveling, of course, which the crisis has been made difficult now. On climate, we need to have the same level of support, the same idea of the emergency, and therefore all of the actors who invested need to change or reinvent things concerning Africa, a new model that can guarantee prosperity for citizens. It must guarantee an easier access to a comfort in their lifestyle that is legitimate for everyone, and to be more sober perhaps than the MUBER used in the past, whether in Europe or elsewhere today. So it is a chance for Africa to carry and support this new development model, but it is also a huge challenge. And of course, I'm very happy that the investment bank is changing and becomes a climate bank. I had the occasion at many occasions with BI to see how it was going to happen and take place, but the access of financing from the BI is not easy. It's already not easy from European collectivity. It is even harder for the southern collectivities, and especially for cities and regions, because we need to strengthen capacities, at the same time the legal capacities in the countries and cities for them to have a direct access to loans without going through the state. And the EU must acknowledge and support the decentralizing efforts that are taking place in Africa. We are counting on the support of the ambassadors, of the EU delegations, to explain things to the state, and explaining that it is by strengthening capacities of their local activities that we will have a sustainable and fair development. There is also the commitment of the states through cooperation policies, and as Jean-Pierre said, the engagement of the cities, the regions, the EU, and the ENPA, now it has been renamed, former DGFCO, has a program which is regionalized, meaning that all of the finance and cooperation, all the financing will be attributed through programs, national programs and regional programs. The EU delegations will be able to support the cooperation projects linking different African cities, European cities, and there's already an envelope reserved to do so of 300 million euros. It's very little if we consider the climate crisis, but it is a lot if we really reserve this Europe and keep it for the cooperation from territory to territory. And this also is added on to what Mrs. Ambassador mentioned, to fight against climate change and for development in general. So we will be able to find a finance source, and for the EU collectivities haven't really done much in terms of decentralizing cooperation. We hope they will not give it up. We see there's cooperation in Germany, in the Netherlands, Belgium, and northern countries, and it is an effort, an important effort from all of the partner countries. And for countries, regions, I know a lot of countries and regions who, despite the crisis, the COVID crisis, are continuing and want to pursue this cooperation. And the COVID crisis, it is clear, we can see that we were able to show that it was possible to mobilize forces when necessary. And it is an appeal I am launching to all of the actors, all of the Europeans, and all of the financiers. If we can find as many funds to fight against climate, I think one big step will be taken. This is an appeal to all the funders And it is also important to underline the role of the associations and in territorial collectivities. There are national organizations that are members of UCLG Africa in order to help the collectivities to find finance sources, financing, and also help them. I'm not going to say manage, but in a way, yes, it is managing these financing modes. It is important to manage the access to the financing, of course, but generally this ability to manage funds, it is not necessarily the case for smaller collectivities, and therefore we have a role to play in the support we can provide them. We need to strengthen capacities of national associations by creating a framework that can also help these collectivities. And it is the work that is undertaken by UCLG Africa. And this is also what our national associations in Europe are doing. So all this must find its place, and that is why we must continue to work with the Covenant of Mayors, in Sub-Saharan Africa, continue to develop these relationships, build networks to help, to support on all these topics. And then I will finish, but there is a true emergency. The climate urgency exists. It is not something that will come in the future. And if we want to save life on our planet, I'm not saying saving the planet, because the planet will do fine without us. But if we want to keep our place on this planet and the place of other species, since I was last week in Marseille, in France, and we talked about biodiversity, as you know, we need to act now with everyone together. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. Thank you for this commitment, which raises a lot of hope and the willingness to change. No matter what we do, we will not be able to change everything. We have a very clear framework, the support of the EU, a clear support for supporting cooperation between local authorities, local governments in Africa regarding the issue of sustainability, and to raise the issue of funding all these initiatives. But there are some possible perspectives. We have another example with Benin. Mr. Ignace from Benin, mayor of Copargo. I remember 2 years ago, Benin announced their willingness to see local climate action being included in national ODDs. Have you been able to set up any mechanisms to favor multi-level dialogue for sustainable development? And how did you include all the various stakeholders? Mr. President, you have the floor. Mr. Mayor, rather. We have a connection problem. Mr. Mayor, you have the floor. Yes, hello, can you hear me? Did you hear the question? Yes, yes, we can hear you. You have the floor. Mr. Atropo, you have the floor. Okay, thank you very much. The question you asked. I did not quite hear it. I was getting ready to join you. Could you remind me of the question again, please? Okay, go ahead. Would you mind restating your question? The question is as follows. Benin said that they wanted to, we had a meeting in Benin, the minister of the government said they wanted to include local climate action in the SDGs, sorry, and the national climate action. My question, therefore, since the decision was made by your government, have you seen any mechanism, have any mechanism been put in place to enable multi-level dialogue with all the stakeholders, and how have the local authorities been involved in this? Thank you. I want to highlight the willingness of the Benin government. I want to thank them for the commitment, clear commitments followed by actions. After this meeting, we had a consultation meeting. We met together to work, and I wanted to thank people for this commitment. We are on the eve of reforms. We are working on these reforms in the coming weeks with the state ministers. And we want to see in these reforms mayor's actions to be highlighted. Next Tuesday, we will have a meeting at the presidency. And I want to reassure you, Mr. Jean-Pierre, that after the commitments that we made with you, we've not been there sitting, doing nothing. We've been working hard. By then, I will be able to send you a report with all the details of all I'm talking about. Thank you again. I'm going to be preparing this meeting about our reforms, and I will leave my colleagues to take the floor after me, if you wouldn't mind, if you would allow me. Sure, Mr. Mayor from Copargo, Mr. Inyas. Are you with us? Are you with us, Mr. Mayor? They may have difficulties connecting. Inyas, are you there? Mr. President, I think we have difficulties. I think Mr. Mayor is not able to connect. If you don't mind, therefore, we will move on. Do we have Mr. Mayor of Copargo with us? Can you hear me, Mr. Mayor? Mr. Mayor of Copargo, are you there? I'm afraid we have lost Mr. Mayor. Therefore, if you don't mind, I will now turn to Mrs. Yao Mary. Are you here with us? Are you here, Mrs. Yao Mary? Yes, I'm here. You are in charge of you're head of the division of the fight against climate change at the Directorate of Environment, Ministry of Environment in Lomé, Togo. One of the recommendations of last June's meeting in Lomé regarding access to local climate action was to prepare a readiness program for local authorities to be able to come up with some climate energy projects and to access these fundings. Where are we standing with regards to these projects? Could you tell us a bit more about it? Thank you, General Secretary. Hello, everyone. Thank you, and hello to all the panelists. I hope you can hear me fine. Regarding maybe I can stop my videos. We can see you. Regarding the readiness program, local authorities are facing difficulty of mobilizing resources to implement the local action, climate action, and all the activities. I believe this is why the Covenant of Mayors had taken their responsibility with the stakeholders to prepare this program. Just a quick reminder about our objectives for the members who may not know about this. For the participants, the main objective, therefore, of this program is about strengthening institutional capacities of the local authorities and the local governments. The main purpose is to help state members to mobilize their resources for climate action, finances, and to fund adaptation and mitigation actions in their local municipalities, and to contribute to the territorialization and to make it efficient. We have three main objectives: strengthening the institutional capacities at the local level to apprehend this issue of climate change through technical assistance and training sessions. Second goal is to enable access to climate funding at a local level. Third goal is to strengthen cooperation, local cooperation in fighting against climate change. Along with these objectives, our main activities, the main activities will be to assess local development plans or ongoing development projects for the implementation, to take into account the challenges of climate change, the elaboration of a technical guide for a better integration of local projects to reinforce local government's capacities to implement measures for local change, developing strategies to reinforce capacities regarding information activities for education and information communication for implementing local communication plans. There is determination on the basis of national commitments as part of the NDCs. There is determination also of indicators and elaboration of a monitoring framework, assessment to measure the implementation of the territorial contributions. We are also preparing strategies for mobilizing resources and implementing taking into account the role of the private and the public sector, the capacities of local institutions for the implementation of the NDCs on the basis of the results of the assessment of the needs. There is also a training aspect for accessing for the local authorities to be able to access the alignment of structures and mechanisms of decision-making of the local governments to implement the various projects. There is a national workshop for how to use the tools at the local level and using the tools for adaptation projects. I think the beneficiaries of this project will be, first of all, the local governments, and local associations, national associations, and local collectivities, NGOs, etc., at a local level. So far, where we stand, first of all, we were able to submit our first project to the Green Fund for Climate, and the Secretariat has expressed some comments which were included to a final version, which was submitted a few days to 3 days ago. Our observations mainly were about, not so much about the main content, but mainly the way of saying this, like reorganization, numeration, and procedures, but not the actual content. They asked for clarification to be more consistent with our targets. They asked us to explain our theory for change to show the connection between our objectives, our goals, the issues raised, the barriers, and the various measures to solve these barriers. Our next step, I'm thinking about perspectives now. We are waiting for the signature of this version and in order to move on. Mr. General Secretary, this is the state of play for us. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for this point, which was rather positive, I have to say. The conversation with the Green Fund is moving on. You've been very reactive, following the observations that were given to you. Maybe your last remarks regarding the letter and the, I don't know how it should be done, but I think for accessing the Green Fund in the different countries, I think people should be more reactive for the request to move on quicker. If you would allow me, the ENG know how they do it. It's up to them to speed up this process to make things move on quicker. Thank you very much for your contribution regarding the readiness program. We hope that there will be a great opportunity for funding these activities. Now I want to turn to Mr. Cheikh Ahmed Tidiane, Director of the CDG from Senegal. Is he here with us? Yes, I'm here. Your institution is a partner by excellence of local authorities and territories, in which way is your intervention, the CDG of Senegal, the Caisse des Dépôts, in which way is it helping the development of the climate agenda in Senegal, and what do you envisage to make sure that all of the caisses, you are a network of caisses, would take this on board, and to make sure that this is part of the priorities, action for your organization?
I'd like to thank you very much for giving me the floor. I want to express my gratitude for organizing this panel today, and it's extremely interesting. Thank you for the invitation. I think it's extremely important, and it is even more important because this morning I'm extremely happy to be here while seeing Pascal Prod speaking on CNews. I saw something that really shocked me, and it is not a strong word enough. There was a poll amongst young people, and 30% of the people asked said they didn't want to have children anymore, because there's not a good action towards climate, no actions for the climate and to fight against climate change on the local level. And this is a central issue in our public policies. So therefore, I would like to thank the presidents of UCLG Africa. Also, I want to thank all of the panelists, and I would like to mention the name of Mr. Mayor, Mrs. Mayor in Kenya. Oh, we cannot hear the speaker anymore. We are losing our speaker. Can you hear me now? Yes, go ahead. Please pursue if you can. We hear you, but we lose you at times. So unfortunately, as you can see, I am visiting a construction site. So I'm in a car. I want to apologize to all the participants for this. And I don't know if you heard me, but I will repeat what I said. So I wanted to mention Mrs. Mayor of Dakar, and I want to congratulate her for her wonderful presentation. Thank you. Can you still hear me? Yes, we do. We can hear you. Hello? Are you? Wait, I'm going to try to stop the video because there are issues with the connection. I'll be back in 30 seconds. All right. So I think we have definitely lost our speaker, or is he back? Mr. Sheikh Ahmed Tidianba is back. Yes, a little better. I stopped the video because apparently there are technical issues. I'd like to remember that the CDC, through the legislative scheme, has trust. Is working on general interest missions, as you said, financing of the different sectors, financing for housing and strategic projects. And you see that how the CDC, as in France or elsewhere, CDC is a support, a help for the public policies. And therefore, as for local collectivities, territorial collectivities, in the same way that it is working, there are other models around the world known for their engagement for climate. It has adopted policies for the collectivities through climate action and eco-responsible projects. The CDC Senegal is finalizing a strategy to support the territorial collectivities through expertise and financing. I would like to give a few examples of this. We have a territorial collectivity, Sonderia, with which we have just signed MOU for the building of a market with biosourced products. I would like to remind you that one of the most important plants in photovoltaic panels in the north of Senegal is producing today 20 megawatts, which really helps a great number of the people in the population. The project of a forest subsidiary, I just came from a meeting with the forest company in France, and we are going to launch a study for this forestry company. We are going to create activities, forest activities, and it is very important for our climate agenda. Another example that I would like to give you, we also had the project for decarbonation, and I hope we will be able to work with it on this project with Mrs. Mayer. Unfortunately, the Olympic Games have been postponed, but we have committed and engaged to proceed to work on decarbonization because of the climate degradation. As Mrs. Mayer said, and others have underlined it and highlighted, there are worries and difficulties for the mobilization of resources. And I believe that the Caisse des dépôts et consignations, or Deposit and Consignment Office, will greatly contribute to find the quality resources and work for it. So we want to be the receptacle of these funds and provide a support through our RSE. I have a program for youth, for young people and collectivities, a platform on which we are going to use the resources that we are going to collect, and also we will finance projects that are working on the preservation of biodiversity and preservation of and protection of our climate. This is our fight, and I believe that with the support we received through the World Forum and the Caisse des dépôts in Western Africa, or Deposits and Consignment Office, I would like to thank you. I hope I was brief enough, and if there are any other questions, I will be happy to answer later. Hello? Thank you very much, Secretary General, for your presentation, your speech. We well understood what you said, and you're available to take part in the climate action. You mentioned the survey saying that now young people do not want to have children anymore because there's no point because of the climate hazard and danger that is now. It is really urgent to take action. And I also heard that the Caisse des dépôts et consignations is fully engaged with the territorial collectivities, and we would really like to follow this engagement, to hold it with the different national and associations and local collectivities. Now, let me ask Mr. Sini Lanfo, I don't know if he's here, Ambassador of Mali for Climate and Adaptation for Africa, Mitigation and Adaptation. Mr. Lanfo, if you are here, we can, I think you are used to working on these issues of climate. The question of financing is probably one of the main challenges in question. What is worrying is that we don't really know what the African position is and what place this theme will have in the different discussions. Could you shed light on this and what message and the message you could send to the different mayors or territorial collectivities on the financing source to implement the plan on the territorial level? There are a lot of existing plans, but that are not achieved, and some of the plans are not adapted and they don't find any financing. So could you tell us, perhaps, I guess that negotiations, the negotiations which will be held in Glasgow, what are you hoping from those? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Secretary General. Hello, Mrs. Mayor in Dakar also. Dakar is a city that is extremely important for me. I was born there and I was really impatient to go back. So I'm happy to learn that next year it will be possible. I listened carefully with great interest to the comments of the ambassador, His Excellency, Her Excellency, Mrs. Yan, and the different colleagues. Perhaps 3 words for my introduction. The climate financing and financing in general is, of course, the key element. It is important at all levels, important on the national level, important on the local level. And just a few elements for Africa. When you look at all the climate actions that Africa must lead by 2030, we would need about $300 million. This is a gigantic figure and humongous. And we will not get 1/100 probably of this amount. So the question of mobilizing resources and access to resources is a fundamental question at all levels. And the national level and regional level have as much difficulty than the local level or territorial level. So that's the first point. Second point is that it took a lot of time, perhaps 15 years, for the international level to understand that the impact is not only on the local level, but the implementation and its success depend on the territories. And we had to wait after the Paris Agreement 2015, 2016, so that at the COP level, at the African group level, people understood that if we don't tackle this question of territories and in the formulation and planification, the follow-up, the resources, everything, we couldn't have a good implementation and successful one. So it is time to work on this. And I think that almost 2 years ago, the Committee of African Chiefs took a decision to acknowledge the central aspect of the implementation of in the territories and the mission and work of these African groups through 3 mandates that are key to me. The mandate to raise awareness and for advocacy that you are doing not only in Africa, but in other places, the knowledge and the strengthening of capacities, facilitation and mobilization of resources, and of course, identification and structuring of the project portfolios. The partnership that is with the that I was very happy to listen to Mr. Abba, the director, who mentioned the different activities that are implemented for the Caisse des Dépôts and Conciliation in Dakar and Senegal, and that it is a very good news. If I may, Now, in terms of the place of collectivities and the challenges that must be noted, I see 4 of them. The first great challenge for collectivities is to align and integrate the plans that are carried out with the NDCs. Our speaker is frozen and I think he's back. I'm coming back to the 4 challenges that we must note. First, the alignment and integration of the collectivity plans in the famous NDCs, because the NDC must encompass all of the actions made in the country. And unfortunately, in many regards, the actions of the collectivities are not integrated in these contributions. So this is the first level. The second level is mutualizing the plans of the collectivities to reach a critical volume. So depending on the country you're in, there are a few hundred or 1,000 collectivities. So you need to mutualize things, to aggregate these plans, to have a critical volume, because when we are talking about mobilization of resources on the international level, the size is important. We cannot have access to an international fund with a 100,000 dollar project. So if we aggregate all of the plans in a region, in a state like Senegal, then we could reach a critical size of several $100 million, and then it would be interesting for international mechanisms. So these are the challenges, how we can mutualize and aggregate our plans. The third challenge is the identification of financial institutions capable to support these plans. And I'm very happy once again that Mr. Ba, the director, took the floor, because once again, these caisses de dépôt or deposit and consignment offices must represent the collectivities. So having these caisses de dépôt accredited to have access to funds and for them to be able to support the plans, the aggregated plans of our collectivities, is a major element in the mobilization. And lastly, access to mobilization of resources, whether on a territorial level or on a national level, it is a challenge that is important and full, and it requires very specific knowledge. Formulating projects is a specific expertise. It is not only difficult for collectivities, but the ministries themselves are experiencing difficulties in that area. To elaborate projects, so the question of strengthening the capacities of our planners for the formulation of the projects, for the fiduciary aspect, receiving funds either international or from other entities, it is possible, but you need to have the fiduciary ability and to have the right standards in execution and follow-up of the assessment. And I will finish with the 5th point, the agenda of transformation for UCLG Africa. For these African collectivities, I am happy to see that the work has already started with the readiness project and with the 8 countries. UCLG Africa was just received the status of partner for the implementation by the Green Fund for Climate, which helps us mobilize countries and find readiness funds for the collectivities. So we want to go towards an accreditation of the projects with Green Fund. And 4th step of strategic partnership, not only with UCLG Africa, but also with great bilateral actors. And once again, it is important in the implementation and mobilization of the resources and collectivities and the place of the collectivities in Africa. UCLG Africa can be a platform for the mobilization of resources, but also on questions of negotiation, and it could push forward these towards the chief of states. As I said 2 years ago, the Organization of African Representatives, it is the role as an entity, as UCLG, to federate around these questions. I'm going to close with this point, knowing that His Excellency, the President, will become for 2 years the coordinator of Coordinator of African Chiefs, and the Environment Minister, the President of the Conference for the Environment. It will be a unique occasion to strengthen the position of collectivities at all levels. So I hope I didn't take up too much time, but thank you very much for your attention.
Mr. General Secretary, are you there? Yes, I was saying that I want to thank you for your contribution, which is also a challenge. What you described could be compared to a battle, yet it is a challenge that we need to meet. If I understood you right, African negotiators will make sure that what is happening is mainly at the local level, and to make sure that the fundings and the resources for climate action have to reach the local governments, which is not quite yet the case. We've heard the various speakers, the mayor of Dakar, you've heard almost everyone, all the mayors saying the same thing. And you comforted them by saying that these things happen at the local level. And I hope that things will be clarified for the better in the future. During the COP26.
Jean-Pierre.
Knowing the alert by the recent IPCC report that we should act as a matter of urgency, and where the money will be coming from to go from CIACAP to concrete project implementation on the ground. Can you give or shed some light here? Kobe, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Jean-Pierre. It's always a pleasure for me as your equivalent in UCLG Africa to speak from ICLEI Africa, because I want to remind ourselves and everybody here present that we indeed, between ICLEI Africa and UCLG Africa, and with other city networks on the continent, such as C40, we are taking hands. And indeed, with UCLG Africa and ICLEI Africa, we've got a very, very strong partnership manifested through our MOU to take collective action and to build on each other's strengths. Because the one thing I want to emphasize here, we heard some wonderful stories of hope already this morning, but I want to emphasize that we need to tackle these 5 points we've heard about and the many other issues around climate finance together. It is only together that we are going to support and enable our cities at the scale and at the level that they all deserve. So, Your Excellencies and colleagues, I'd like to begin by thanking the Mayor's Office of Dakar and the Honourable Mayor Soham El Wardini in particular for hosting this great event. My thanks also go to the co-funders of Covenant of Mayors Sub-Saharan Africa, the European Union, the Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, BMZ, and the Spanish Agency for International Development Cooperation, ACID, present here today, for making this change-making initiative possible. It is an honor to work with our partners, UCLG Africa, CMR, GIZ, Expertise France, AFD, and ACID on implementing COMSA across Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa. And we thank Climate Chance in particular for the opportunity of hosting this COMSA Day as part of your Climate Chance Summit proceedings today. I'm so pleased to be able to speak to you all during this year's COMSA Day, where the most pressing issues for climate change at the local level in Africa will be highlighted during the course of the day. We already know finance is one of them, and we're already seeing some progress there. But as you say, not enough, and we need more support. And there's great initiatives coming our way from COMSA for our cities. We would like to acknowledge the contribution of ACID in the preparation of all these technical sessions today, and that we really hope that we will be able to meet in person once again at the events that we are planning together already for the months ahead and for 2022. As the host of the COMSA Secretariat, ICLEI Africa is extremely proud to welcome over 260 mayors and political leaders who are already sharing their knowledge and success stories, focusing on overcoming the challenges that local governments face together with business sectors, financiers, NGOs, and research institutions. Ensuring climate considerations are embedded in all city planning policies, not just as standalone climate plans, is crucial to ensure resilient and sustainable development for our continent. Aligning climate interests across all city departments is therefore vital. Even more vital is premeditating potential sources of climate and sustainability finance from the onset of all development planning and departmental planning when we are developing our local climate action plans, our CECAPs. We have to bear this in mind already. And as we've heard, we have to bear in mind the alignment with the national objectives and the national inspirations. So even when city leadership is broadly committed to climate action, climate can be seen as an issue that sometimes competes with other institutional priorities on the ground. However, in practice, impactful climate policy can indeed double up to address also those many other pressing economic, environmental, and development issues, including a green and inclusive recovery from COVID-19. Climate must be framed as a complementary and not a competitive issue at the local, national, and continental level. COMSA is a major catalyst for local climate action in the region. Although African cities are already experiencing the very negative effects of climate change, the solutions and innovations lie within our cities and our territories. The opportunities for positive change are therefore enormous, and I'm so grateful that many of our national and international speakers recognize this today here. COMSA is equipping cities to transition from climate planning to on-the-ground action in order to cultivate an unstoppable community of practices for climate action and sustainable access to energy. As technical help desk of COMSA, ICLEI Africa provides technical support to over 260 local governments across Sub-Saharan Africa in the fields of sustainable energy access and in furthering their climate change objectives. Our support covers the entire journey from the development of baseline studies, GHG inventories, risk and vulnerability assessments, and access to energy assessments, and then also target setting and action planning, and project conceptualization, prioritization, and early stage development. For instance, pre-feasibility studies before we go to the real bankable studies. And this is where we really are delighted to partner with UCLG Africa and the development banks to take these pre-feasibility studies into bankable proposals that can go and access those funds at the scale that we heard is needed. The technical help desk and implementing partners of COMSSA have supported the development of 10 CEACAPs that are near finalization. 611 city officials have already received training in 38 trainings, and 12 implementation projects are currently receiving tailored early stage project support. How exciting, but how much more should we be doing together? I'm therefore confident that opportunities such as this serve to mobilize actors together around the issues of sustainability and the fight against climate change ahead of the upcoming COP26, which will be held in Glasgow later this year. As the saying goes, a planned city is a well-prepared city. And this has become even more important as we see all over the world how cities have adapted to the global pandemic by embedding resilience plans and early warning systems across their future policies. COMSSA elevates this voice of local governments into national, regional, and global discourses through representation at high-level events such as this one. And we're delighted to do it with all our COMSSA partners, hand in hand. In doing so, COMSSA signatories are able to learn best practices from one another and share their experiences. By partnering with COMSSA, signatories benefit from resources and endeavors to assist them in securing funding and in innovative ways. And we're going to delve a little bit deeper into that in the sessions after this opening session. And ultimately, they can turn their climate action plans into tangible action on the ground, because that is what is needed most. I'm so proud to be leading the team that hosts the COMSSA Secretariat, and we look forward to continuing the COMSSA great work that is being done collectively in building climate resilience and increasing adaptive capacity in Africa. I want to close off by saying we only can do this in partnership with one another, building on each other's strengths and perspectives. And what a great opening session this has been. I now wish you all well during this event, this day, in your deliberations during the virtual sessions, and hope that you enjoy COMSSA Day as much as we are. Thank you very much, Jean-Pierre.
Thank you, Kobe. I have a request by Mayor Wardini, who wants to leave us, so maybe we can allow her to, Madame le Maire.
Oui. Rather, Mrs. Mayor, she has to leave us, so I'm giving her the floor first. Sorry, I'm going to have to chair a workshop now. I have to leave, but my colleagues are still connected. What I wanted to say as a conclusion is that we must enable vertical partnership with the various local, departmental, national, regional governments, and also encourage dialogue between national, international, territorial experts regarding climate funding. We need to enable access of local actors, private actors, civil society to external funding, because we have met some difficulties in accessing funding, and to have balance between private and public sector. The climate fund should play a role in reassuring investors and developing mechanism in favor of non-state actors. Despite all the huge efforts, the implementation of the NDCs and all the information that we have received to show the willingness to mobilize all the fundings, it is still obvious that in order to facilitate access to climate fundings, this is also to help cities like Dakar to speed up the implementation of the process. As cities, on the other hand, we need to be more aware of what these funding resources are. What are the modality of access? What are the criteria for being eligible to these fundings? Therefore, we need to develop our capacities with local, with internal, external partners to access what is offered to us as funding support. Mr. General Secretary, we hear about billions of euros, we hear about green fundings, but we have difficulties accessing these funds. So I'm really calling now for help to give us some advice. How do we manage to get hold of these fundings to help us implement these projects for the good of our population? This is what I wanted to say. Thank you, General Secretary. Thank you for giving me the floor again before I have to leave. Thank you, Mrs. Mayor. This is very inspiring as usual, what you've just said. And I'm sure that you always have this tendency to act upon your words. I know you are such a person, and I know you will be standing with us in this battle. It is a battle, so that we can win this battle. What Mr. Seninafo was saying has been reassuring. You also heard our colleague from the EU, of the CCRE, saying how much the support of the COM SSA will continue, and how there is a willingness to make sure that the climate issue will not go away. There is another issue
n'est pas à l'intérieur de toutes les politiques.
Why is it that climate action is not part of all the policies, like the issue of inequality, for example? Can the panel answer this question? Yes, thank you, Jean-Pierre. I hope you can hear me well. I think you are right, indeed. Indeed, the issue of climate should be in all the policies. And this is the purpose of the Green Deal that was proposed by the EU, that all the European policies should include the climate issue in their own policies. Therefore, the purpose should not be to have a separate funding for climate and people do whatever they want with it, but that in any investment, in any policies, that they should take into account the issue of climate. That's what we are saying as well as part of the CEMR. We should maybe get inspired by what is done in terms of fighting against inequalities. Even in that respect, we know that the climate issue is also key in this. Climate change is also a carrier of many inequalities between citizens, between men and women, between young and older people. So it has to be included as well. We could not have just a single climate policy. The climate issue should be part of all the policies. I totally agree with this. Coming back to what Mrs. Mayor was saying regarding information, she did say that we have our own responsibility in this, and I would agree with this. Our responsibility is to organize, or the training rather than information, the actual training of local actors, of technicians, to explain to them how to access fundings, it's not just giving access. The COM SSA will never have the fundings to support all of the local government, but we know there is money in the climate fund at the EU level with the financial backers. So there should be a module for training that we should really create, develop ourselves for all the local authorities and governments to explain how to go and reach these funds, how to get the money, and how to manage after you have had access to this funding. You need to be able to report and give account and know how to use it. This is something maybe that the Covenant of Mayors could actually be working on with our stakeholders for the coming years. Thank you. I do not see any other questions in the chat. Kobe was saying, talking about mainstreaming, mainstreaming in all the policies. The question really I'm raising, we've talked about mainstreaming, it is like boxes which you tick. You tick boxes. If that's what we mean by mainstreaming, I think we're losing track. I think there should be a deeper reflection that would maybe require a bit more research, in-depth research. I would suggest that we will really take this on board as now there is another question that is raised by Mr. Bakari. It would not be possible to negotiate direct in order to access funding through the mechanism of the EU. Who would like to answer this question? Mrs. Ambassador, you're still here with us? I can maybe try to answer this question. Hello, everyone. I'm in charge in Dakar of the portfolio for sustainability and investment for local governments. She had to leave, Mrs. Ambassador, for another meeting, for another important meeting. I'm replacing her. Maybe I can try to give you some elements of response. First of all, what was discussed in the last few minutes, I can only confirm that with our new Green Deal, the new Green Deal, and I think that was already the case for some time, we have an obligation to make sure that we include all the environmental, climatic aspects in all of our policies, in all of our projects which we are funding. This trend has been reinforced even more so in the last few years through the Green Deal, which is a strong axis of our cooperation. So I can only confirm that this is a strong intent. Now, regarding mobilizing access to funding, I can give you maybe an advice of one of our partners. There is a strong willingness, and Mrs. Ambassador said it, we want to work with local actors, local leaders, representative of the civil society, young people. There is a willingness, a strong willingness to do so, and to also mobilize fundings as much as possible with lever effect with investment banks, European banks, etc., and to try to have a lever effect to really finance structuring projects in order to develop urban centers, municipalities in sustainability. This is our willingness. We need a strong counterpart that is very well trained and structured we need to have counterparts that would be strong enough so that we can mobilize the fundings. Sometimes it's an issue. There is room for making progress to reinforce our capacities at a local level in many countries. There are policies for decentralization which are not yet totally fully implemented, which shows a lack of transfer of means towards local governments. And therefore, local governments have a less capacity to organize themselves, to train people, to recruit competent people, etc., to be able to prepare investments and projects. There is a lack indeed, and we know that and we feel that when we prepare investment projects. We are working historically with governments, national government, with some governmental agencies. For example, in Senegal, we have several agencies that we work with. And if we want to go lower at the departmental or local level, it gets a bit more difficult. We do have projects, of course. I think Dakar and Bekin are good examples of this, but we're talking about several millions euros project. We're not talking about huge project, but when we're talking about interregional train project, we are working with governmental agencies. We try to involve local authorities, of course, as much as possible, and it's important so that their own needs, their own constraints would be taken into account. But we work with national level stakeholders, and if we could take it down lower to have a stronger impact with more local stakeholders, we need to be able to develop capacities at a local level by mobilizing domestic resources to enable these local governments to be stronger and more robust. This is what I wanted to say.
So Mrs. Polina Poremski, the last person to speak, to take the floor before concluding, because we already went over time. Mrs. Polina. Is Mrs. Polina Poremski still here? If not, apparently she is not. Her microphone is not on, she's saying. What I would like to do is now to conclude in 3 or 4 sentences. Yes, I'm here. I want to apologize. Sorry. It is an honor for me to take the floor because I have a lot of questions and I'm going to summarize them in one, in fact. Yes, please. So I worked in the climate team with France, with local collectivities, and we also already met years ago. But do you not believe that all these questions, all these financing issues, with the COVID-19, of course, now COVID and climate, I guess for me, it's the same thing, in fact. So should we not look for climate financing to say that local collectivities are the most important elements? In fact, I think it is quite obvious to me that local collectivities are the main actors, the most important ones. And I don't understand why, for the moment, we were not able to show the different institutions that I think the call for projects can be written in a different manner, and that somewhere it would be a way to use subtlety, and therefore we could be ready to review things. It's not that difficult. That's what I wanted to say. So thank you. Yes, I believe that our worry, the worry you have, sorry, and the way you presented it is how can we have the money land where it's necessary? Yes, absolutely. The other side of the question is that if it's so obvious, why is something so obvious not done? And in this case, we need to ask about the way of all our institutions are working and functioning. Yes, I totally agree with you. And this is why I said, or I told Frédéric before, that it is a work in construction that we need to work on. It's a new way of storytelling, a new and we are seeing this. You heard the different mayors. So things are understood. Now we need to show how the mechanics can be used for the money to land where it's necessary. What I was wondering when being on the field in Africa, Asia, Europe, it's that at times people who are who can tell you, yes, but it's for me, it's very important. Sometimes you learn from these people on the field and you can translate it into very administrative, therefore political points to create a project that is better and that can answer to the needs that are on the field in the country. And therefore, listening to these very difficult things, perhaps that would be the good idea, but it is just one interpretation of the situation. Thank you very much. Thank you, it's important and well received. So I would like us to close this workshop by saying that I heard very good points, very good things. The first good news is that everybody acknowledges now that the action is done on the local level. So we agree on that. And this is where we really need what we need to insist on to bring change. Everybody says and agrees that indeed, we must continue to support the Covenant of Mayors and the CIACAP projects for climate. So we also heard that everybody is saying that to do so, the national associations for collectivities must be strengthened. And something that is less engaging, perhaps, it's what was said by our friend, Selina Faux, who said, yes, there are challenges. And one of the challenges you are faced with is that you don't know how to mutualize requests, demands. You must work and better integrate your plans for the NDCs. And above all, you must take into consideration that the resource mobilization is a job in itself, and you must strengthen your fiduciary capacity if you won't have access to big money or big quantities of money. And it was said that we need an agenda for our transformation to mobilize all the associations, national, continental, so that the path to take is more visible. What I take from this is that the door is open. And now at the COP26, we will need to speak up, to be heard, and to organize this. Since there is a meeting of the mayors organized at the COP26, I hope that our voices will be even better heard and that the African group will have a strong place, a strong visibility, so that the voices of the local collectivities can echo. And I hope that in Glasgow, we will have concrete actions for the territories and an openness, an opening to all the climate association and funding. What I suggest is that the cooperation, the decentralized cooperation, which is another mechanism to strengthen the mutual cooperation, it should be better financed. And for the moment, for the time being, the financing is not optimal. It's not the best. There's a necessary mutualization once again. And we need to work together to be able to find the means through GECOM, perhaps, through partnerships between the different UCLG parties and have the capacity to finance this mutualization through the climate funds. I don't know, but this is ongoing work. And I want to thank all of the speakers for the quality of their speeches. And I would like to thank all the participants also for the quality of their listening and their reactions. And I wish you a good afternoon. Goodbye. Thank you, Jean-Pierre.
Thank you, Jean-Pierre.